Big story of the day. The Jacob Zuma Foundation says Zuma's doctors have advised him not to attend his corruption trial, which starts today. It's not clear whether the former president will be in court given that advice. The fraud, money laundering and corruption trial is set to get underway at the High Court in Pietermaritzburg. Now, eNCA's Thulasizwe Simelane is covering that story for us and joins us now. Thulasizwe, a very important development, but the question is, to what extent does it affect today's proceedings? Like we stated a bit earlier, that it seems that the foundation had indicated that they would be seeking a postponement. So the question is whether the postponement proceedings at the very least can continue without him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major development, Mfundo, in as far as the proceedings are concerned. At this particular stage, deliberations still ongoing between the prosecution, the defense and Judge Piet Koen to try and find a way forward of what is to happen now that there's indication that former President Jacob Zuma will not be coming to court. The JG Zuma Foundation telling us that this is on the advice of his doctor, in that he is not feeling well and his doctor has advised that he shouldn't come through to trial. So I imagine that, the Criminal Procedure Act is laid out in front, in my imagination, it's probably laid out in front of the two legal teams and Judge Piet Koen. Of course, three legal teams, because there's also the second accused, Talis, who are the juristic person, the company that is co-accused to Mr. Zuma, laid out and looking at what happens now in these instances. Just from a quick glance, there are a few provisions in the Criminal Procedure Act that talk to this eventuality of someone not coming through to court, the various possibilities that I imagine that the experts will now be pouring through and saying to us whether the reasons advanced by Mr. Zuma are sufficient to allow, Judge Piet Koen to make whatever order that he now may have to make. But as things stand at the moment, Mfundo, the indication is that he will not be coming through to court today. This, of course, goes against the guarantees that we were given by the JG Zuma Foundation, which must be separated from his legal team, of course, for purposes of what happens in court. Because in court, what matters is what then transpires in court. Yes, what was said outside may weigh in the various arguments in favor or against what he says is the status quo now, or what his legal team says is the status quo. But as late as yesterday, the JG Zuma Foundation was assuring South Africans that, in their words, contrary to speculation, Mr. Zuma would be in court today, but we find out now that he won't be because they are saying he's not feeling well.
One wonders what could have happened between then, when they had that briefing, and now. But most certainly, this is a case that has captured the minds of South Africans, even to a point where right now I'm just thinking, ordinarily we'd have such matters, these developments, ventilated before the judge currently, like what we saw last time, when the NPA was in fact seeking his medical records. That was a matter that played out before all citizens, where we saw Dalimpofu actually going on to say that, you're not entitled to his medical records. And then we heard the NPA saying, no, they'd like to know why he would not be present. So it's interesting. We would have hoped that we would have all been privy to some of those conversations around his presence today, or perhaps his absence if the matter is to conclude.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the various provisions of the Criminal Procedure Act that become quite relevant. I think, and I'm going to hazard a commitment to it now and say, I think it's around Section 67 of the Criminal Procedure Act that talks to, and if I'm mistaken, of course, I'll always be happy to come back and correct it, but I think that's the section that talks about someone who is out on bail, then not appearing in court. What are the various provisions in terms of what then happens by way of, do you issue an arrest warrant? Under what circumstances do you then issue that? But also a section further step down, I think it's 159 thereabouts, talks about when the proceedings are now underway and the accused is unwell. And again, I say, if I get the sections incorrect, I will be very happy to come back and correct it. But talks about, where the accused is not feeling well, what are the considerations? Because ideally, the accused should be present in court. In fact, it's a provision of the Constitution that when the trial is being conducted, the accused should be in court. But what happens when he's not well enough, or there's been some major development in their personal circumstances such that they are not able to be in court? Those are the various permutations and considerations that I imagine are now being laid out before Judge Pitkun for him to consider how to proceed, because we are in this situation now where the accused number one, Mr. Zuma, certainly indications are that he won't be in court. His supporters, those who support him, such as Carl Niehaus, the J.G. Zuma Foundation and others, are inside court and are now sitting and just waiting to hear what is the word from chambers, from Judge Pitkun's chambers as to how to proceed.
Are in fact starting